lo más importante, creemos, la adopción de medidas que sean coordinadas para que resulten eficaces. Debemos, y este es un llamado importante que hacemos como presidente entrante de la red, aunar nuestras fuerzas y nuestras competencias y habilidades finalmente para aportar en la construcción de un continente americano donde los consumidores estén más y mejor protegidos y las empresas desarrollen su actividad de manera responsable, profesional y sustentable. Este taller es un espacio precisamente para profundizar respecto a estos temas y por eso les extiendo la más cordial invitación a que todos, desde nuestras particulares perspectivas, aprovechemos al máximo esta instancia, compartamos estas experiencias, aprendamos de los demás, nos abramos para recibir las mejores prácticas que estén implementándose a nivel también regional y fortalezcamos en definitiva nuestras capacidades tanto individuales como colectivas. Estoy convencido de que cuando mañana a última hora de la tarde terminemos este taller y hayamos concluido la labor que hemos iniciado hoy, saldremos con nuevas ideas, nuevos contactos, nuevos vínculos y un renovado compromiso con la seguridad de los productos y la protección de los consumidores. Muchas gracias.
Agradecemos las palabras de nuestro director. Sin más entonces, daremos inicio al taller internacional e invitamos a subir a este escenario a los participantes del Foro 1, Era Digital y Seguridad de Productos, retos y oportunidades de la seguridad de productos en la era digital, comercio electrónico e inteligencia artificial. Mientras se instalan en sus lugares nuestros panelistas, les informamos que las preguntas respecto de este foro pueden hacerlas directamente en el botón disponible en el sitio web de nuestro evento www.seguridaddeproductos2024.cl o escaneando el código QR que se encuentra en la parte posterior de sus credenciales. Ahora sí. También les recordamos que este evento está siendo transmitido internacionalmente en este mismo sitio, con audio disponible en inglés y español. En la moderación de este foro nos acompaña Franz Gutiérrez, abogado de la Dirección Regional Metropolitana del CERNAC, Chile. Franz Gutiérrez es investigador del Programa de Derecho de Consumo de la Universidad de Chile y ha realizado investigaciones en todas las materias del área, centrando su indagación en materias vinculadas a niños, niñas y adolescentes como consumidores. Adelante, Franz.
Muy buenas tardes a todos y a todas, bienvenidos y bienvenidas al foro número 1, Era Digital y Seguridad de Productos. Queremos, en primer lugar, presentar a nuestros destacados expositores. Nos acompaña hoy Gustavo Rocha, jefe de la División de Relaciones Institucionales de la Secretaría Nacional del Consumidor del Ministerio de Justicia y Seguridad de Brasil. Queremos saludar también a don Rodrigo Mateluna, subdirector de Estrategia y Servicios a la Ciudadanía del Servicio Nacional del Consumidor Chile. Saludamos también a don Mauricio Horman, miembro de la Junta Directiva del Consejo de la Industria de Cosméticos, Aseo Personal y Cuidados del Hogar de Latinoamérica. Saludamos también a don Álvaro Fuentes, director de la Unidad de Defensa del Consumidor del Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas de Uruguay. Y sin más preámbulo, queremos invitar y dar la palabra a don Gustavo Rocha. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos y todas. Primeiramente, quero agradecer a hospitalidade por parte da CERNAC en la persona del doctor Andrés Herrera, en la persona de Daniel y su equipo. Muchas gracias. Bueno, hoy yo voy a hablar sobre la seguridad de productos en el ámbito digital y la protección de datos. Primeramente, tenemos un contexto.
We live on the internet.
I started searching for airfare tickets, and then I started getting adverts of what to do in Chile. What are the best restaurants in Chile? What is the best season to go skiing? And I wasn't searching for that. I was just looking for an airfare ticket. So I think it's necessary that these advertising aggressiveness needs to be put in check. There needs to be a regulation about this. And there's also the matter that the consumer, in many times, depending on what they're purchasing, can't even realize a purchase contract in their native language. We end up accepting license agreements in English or in other languages. We do not know what is the jurisdiction of these agreements either. We do not know if we can return the products when we purchase them. And so we can have product safety. It's necessary that providers and suppliers provide the complete information to the consumer. The supplier needs to be responsible of the quality of the products that are presented to the consumer. They need to be clear and transparent when it comes to information. There needs to be also transparency in the purchasing process. There needs to be full protection and clear information of when the product will be delivered. Why is the platform permitting the sale of a product that's not original? There needs to be accountability for when something like that happens. There needs to be responsibility against frauds and scams that many people take advantage for in these platforms. Sometimes you want to sell or you want to buy something on a digital platform, but it turns out that it's a scam and the platform does not take responsibility. In Brazil, we have a platform that it's a consumer-to-consumer platform and is a source of many scams. I give the person the phone number, I select a publication, I contact the seller in this supposed platform, and when we agree the delivery of the products to a certain person, the value that is published in the platform will be paid once the person receives the product. But sometimes these are scammers that manage to circumvent the platform's security measures, and then they take advantage of people. And the platforms need to take responsibility for that. There's also the right to the information of the products. We're here to talk about that. And I think that the same aggressiveness that providers, companies employ to advertise to consumers, you can see a lot of consumers don't even know. They don't know what they're buying. They don't know what are the details of the product. In Brazil, that happens in TV advertisements as well. Nowadays, there are other sites like Netflix and among others, and you can see advertising campaigns on social media. The big data knows that Chile has a certain product and the consumer needs to receive the information regarding that. And I think that's a very important matter. And that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you. Up next, we will give the floor to Mauricio Horman. He is going to present about communication to the consumer, in particular when it comes to electronic labeling. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Cernac, for giving us this space. And I am representing CACIC, the Cleaning and Cosmetics Industry Council, and I am also the CEO of the president of the Cosmetics Chamber. We have a very extensive space, and we're always thankful of Cernac's invitation to be able to construct, from the industry perspective, dialogue and and product safety assurance and delivering information to consumers. We're talking about the labeling and electronic labeling of cosmetic and cleaning products. But first, we need to understand at an agency level and from a UN level the technologies of information and communications. By the end of 2022, over 3 billion people were already using internet, which is like 60% of the world population. We have the over 73% of the population has access to mobile devices, so now the technology is accessible for everyone. And we need to start moving forward in the first place. We need to start moving forward in our care for the environment. In that sense, we take responsibility that at a global level there is a tendency on what is labeling for cleaning and cosmetic products. And we need to have a consumer that is always better informed so they can have access to purchase safe products. But if we can't manage, we mismanage these two levers, these two trends, we can fall into the non-compliance of one of the goals of the OECD regarding responsible consumption. But we must never lose track that in the physical plane, and us as an industry, we want to reinforce that the physical labeling must ensure the safe usage of the product is available, so the consumer can access safe purchasing. In the same context, there's already an international precedent. There's already a worldwide law of digital use to fulfill with the rules that are already set. Here we have two examples to show you that that is already something that is happening. Chile is not being left behind. Our health authority already took the initiative. We have a public decree that regulates cosmetic products in the country, and it's already visibilized and contemplates the usage of digital media to deliver better information of better quality to the consumers. So at a local level, we're already taking the necessary measures to advance in this matter. And the same thing is happening worldwide. For example, in Korea, the case of Korea, they are already doing pilot companies to identify if the handling of this digital media complements the consumer towards responsible and well-informed purchasing. The same thing's going on in Europe. In that same line, same thing is happening in Europe. There are cleaning products that emphasize on the consumer, and they also indicate that they should prefer products that have less information, but the information is clearer. I am going to read the main conclusions that we've reached as an industry. According to us, the benefits for the consumer industry and authority. It facilitates access for the consumer to information. The consumer can no longer read the labels, and e-labeling allows presenting all the information that is considered relevant for the consumer, including in other languages, and it's constantly being updated. It reduces the information in physical labeling that increases space for the truly necessary information for the safe usage of the product. It allows the implementation of safety measures that prevent contraband and falsification. And it's very important at a worldwide level. The levels of counterfeit products and contraband is at an all-time high, and we need to avoid these kinds of markets destroy the product's safety. And it also avoids the decisive burden on companies, the excessive burden when it comes to residuals, when it comes to packaging, and helping minimizing the use of packaging materials, paper, ink, and transportation spaces and storage. All of this supports the efforts of the industry towards a circular economy, promotes innovation, reduces cost, while not having to constantly update physical labels. We invite all authorities to continue working in this public dialogue with the private sector to promote legality, learn from other countries in the world, and advance as a region towards the implementation of practices that protect and put consumers first, analyzing the impact and the convergence of regulations for our industries. I don't know if I am inside the allotted time. My screen just turned off. Thank you so much.
Now we'll offer the floor to Mr. Rodrigo Mateluna. Thank you very much, Franz. We'd like to thank you for attending this workshop, and I will have to present the reality of the e-commerce in Chile, and particularly in terms of product safety. And to kick off, I'd like to mention, to quote some figures. This is for particularly delegations coming from other countries, which shows the increase of e-commerce in Chile. The projection by using data from the Chamber of Commerce in 2024, sales will conclude by e-commerce reaching a volume of 15 billion pesos in Chile, with a projection by 2029 of 20 billion pesos. And you can see on the slide, in the chart, that even the next year, we could also reach some levels reached during the pandemic, precisely a time when the pension funds were withdrawn, and also, since we were in lockdown, buying through internet increased a great deal. Some other data related to the per head sale is $500 annually, which places Chile in the first place in the region. That's also very interesting. It has to do with the present penetration of online market, which in Chile represents 15% over the total sales of the commerce, which has progressively been increasing. And that might be considered high for our reality, particularly within Canada, as a reference, has 14%, whereas Spain has 12%. And other factors on why this internet sales grows is given by three main factors: the massification of payment methods. Not for everyone is easy to buy through internet. The improvement in the logistic chain. Probably people from CERNA will say, okay, complaint says the opposite. But what's true about it is that they have improved the logistic chain, particularly the last mile, what has to do with the delivery of the product in our houses, and the explosive or exponential growth of salespeople that didn't do this before, as well as buyers due to the pandemic. Those factors need to be observed so that we can be clear about the context we are placed. I wanted to refer to the regulation in e-commerce, what has to do in the last period, in the last 8 years. There have been some important amendments affecting the product sales in e-commerce. Some of them are related to copyright, some other to free competition, as well as a very important event which seems to be daily, the sale of electric appliances and fuel has a seal or a label, the one from ASEC, and it can be proven through a QR code. This label means the product is certified to be sold in Chile. The National Service of the Consumer CERNAC during 2018 presented an important change in their structure to a legal amendment in which entitle us to audit. ERNAT is an auditing entity, and in 2019 issues a document on best practices, where it aims to generate clear and transparent information to the compliance of the supply safety within transactions and other matters too. And during this last period, let's say the last 3 years, in 2021, the regulation on e-commerce is published. The Pro-Consumer or Favoring Consumer Act, protection of personal data. It enshrines the right for distance purchasing, and there's also modifications in the Trade Code in 2024. The law for personal data protection is enacted, and there's some also modifications related to electric signature and electric documentation. Why do I think this is important? Before the analysis we have at the service, because it gives context to the e-commerce in Chile, so as to understand the size of this monster in a country where we have around 19 million inhabitants. And that has been a very important eruption. What I would like to present as CERNAC, we have some sources of information I will include in this analysis. Last year, CERNAC conducted an analysis on e-commerce whose main goal was to evaluate the availability and the quality of the information provided to the consumers in e-commerce in Chile. The study analyzed 22 e-commerce companies, including marketplaces, supermarket, retail, telecommunications, and 440 products from 11 different categories were also included. In this study, the compliance of the sectorial regulation was analyzed, included as labeling requirements, the law of the consumer, public advertising requirements, and also sectorial requirements. What is what we observed in general within this study? Well, I will quote results and then we'll talk about the findings. Generally speaking, the adjustment is perceived as low. It has to do with the non-compliance of online information for decision making by the consumer. In the sectorial requirements, and this is also part of the conclusions from the study, this lack of adjustment is higher. Then there's a minor adjustment in matters related to particular information on the product with certain regulation demanding a labeling to a technical regulation. And concerning this low non-compliance, there are some relevant aspects worth mentioning. There is a low non-compliance in bicycles and also children products. That's worrying. That can be mentioned, or that's the evidence we have in this findings, and I will refer to the main findings. First and most important is that we can evidence a huge difference between the information received by a consumer when buying a physical product versus a consumer who buys online. Also, some gaps can be verified regarding products warranties. Sometimes not very well informed circumstances, and in general the general requirements for labeling work well in what has to do with the product name, features and basic description, brand, but it doesn't work out well in those attributes which are particularly sensitive in terms of safety. That is, information that might, for example, be related to credit laws and technical norms. Something also important, product has different performances shown in this study. Amazingly, we noticed that national companies, amazingly it's not good or bad, national companies had a much better performance compared to the international companies regarding the compliance of the regulation. Same happened with companies or retail channels, online retail channels, compared to marketplaces. Online retail, higher compliance; marketplace, lower compliance to the regulation. And the product segmentation, let's talk about washing machines. They have the better compliance regarding the information. So in summary, due to time constraint, well, this information will be anyway shared, but some data can be found there regarding the complaints in relation to safety, product safety, and what are the most frequent complaints, as well as the most complained markets beyond the volume, because the volume is low compared to the universal complaints. This is a variable that's important, and it has to do with how these complaints and evidences in safety for the consumers and health for the consumers. You will see in the description foreign elements in food, inoquity problems, transport problems. Therefore, it's not a particularly high number. Those are situations worth being listened to, receiving attention. I will quickly present the general conclusions. Something that was mentioned is a challenge to correct the information asymmetries, aiming to provide tools which can improve the consumer's empowerment when buying online. It can also be observed that consumers have a lot of information, some of them very complex, generating a difficulty to process all data prior to the purchase decision making. This is also in a documentary at Netflix, this buy per click, which becomes very easy, but we realize the information is not always available, or we read it while we don't understand it. That's a sensitive matter in terms of consumers' protection. One important side out of here has to do with generating improvements by the suppliers. In the national market, there's an urgency to improve by companies the information delivery when it's relevant and sensitive in terms of warranty, instructions for use, and safety. And finally, in advertising aspects, advertising needs to be enough, useful, comprehensive to make an informed decision. Of course, we need to move on in this matter when it comes to digital inclusion and also hyper-vulnerability, social, age, or some disability segments. These are challenges we have in terms of protection, safety, and those need urgent attention. One more aspect, because, well, these adjustments have been pointed out related to what I have mentioned. This study, as a goal, had to separately evaluate the stages of purchase. If we have to place ourselves in the buy and sale stages, we need to focus on the post-sale stage, and it's given due to two reasons. The first one has to do with the warranty aspect. Warranty is subject to a sort of small print where the supplier, the buyer realizes about that. And secondly, aspects of safety in the transport affecting the product being received in terms of health, safety, and inoquity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Now we'll have the presentation by Mr. Álvaro Fuentes on the challenges on product safety. Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the organization and also the attendance. It's difficult to have people during these days. They usually use the online presentation rather than being in person. Well, again, Chile's organization is very good, everything very punctual, very well organized. Let- Let's start with product and safety. Product safety, we've been working around that for a long time. Maybe you don't know this, but Chile is an outstanding country in this work. Numbers of alerts with their products is extraordinary due to the population you have and the amount of products that are ready to be sold and for consumption, and the hard-working campaign and education workshops. It's been important. From the other side of the Atlantic, we run into a problem of declaration. Brazil was the one having the best figures on the Mercosur side. In the South Cone region in South America, the Atlantic, and Paraguay, Argentina, Uruguay were terrible. Companies didn't use alerts in their products. At that point, with the creation of the Consumer Safety and Health Network on Mercosur level, we propose to have a common regulation for alerts in order to see if we could reach the goals Brazil was reaching by using the CR tool just today. You'll see the changes. We went from no alert to 1, 2, 3 per year, which is very few. In 2019, the regulation by Mercosur is enacted, and then from 5 or 10 alerts, now we have 22 when we internalize it, and then 35, 65, and then it varies depending on the market variables, whether we have more or less or fewer alerts. This year, there's a drop, and we understand there's something to be working around that in order to detect something that might be under-declared, some products that probably receive no alerts. And for that, we got the CR, the alerts that were there or not. Safety of products and alerts is something that if it is not well worked out by the state, then companies are reluctant to issue alerts because they say, for example, I issue an alert, I'm transparent, I'm honest, and my competitor concealed their flaws, then I blame or I damage my brand. The private sector has always been present there. We need to work jointly to educate the population to say that the products generated in this industrial revolution, stated by our colleague from Brazil, then it is impossible that our products present no defects. So the brands alerting some defects are responsible, socially responsible brands. And the problem we have is that we need to make that more transparent. We need education around that, not only at our portals, but also in the mass media, particularly the written media, which reproduces our alerts, that in parallel they highlight that in cases where there is a company alert, the company is acting properly. You may see that in Canada, Japan, Australia, and Europe. These are the lines of business which present more alerts. Automotive industry, same happens with cars or vehicles. And usually they are European or American brands, Japan, Korea, and then we got other sectors, other countries which do not issue any alert. And this is not because European or Americans or Japanese or Korean manufacture bad cars. It is other companies which do not issue their alerts on defective products, such as airbags exploding, and the on damaging the occupants. Other cars with the bad brakes, where the brake system does not work, which have very severe risk, risking the occupants' lives and also the traffic around it. Brazil, at some point, has issued an alert of an European manufactured country, and in Brazil they changed the tires and they went from zero. Well, they were from aluminum, and then the tires broke and the accidents resulted in families' death. There was no alert for that, and Senacom, with Internacional, which is the safety entity for cars. This situation, the work done by the Agency of Consumers in that sense is pretty relevant because we are talking about the consumer's life. These are the compliance rates. When we launched this regulation in Mercosur, we got the CIART and the OAS network. Some alerts were issued, and then we started observing. The results were not controlled. Companies only informed through a publication on the newspapers. Nobody read, and then nothing happened, and nobody presented to that alert. Or nobody can do that if they are informed that brakes are not working. Then we changed the law, and it says it doesn't matter the way you will launch your campaign. What it is important is the result. If nobody comes when I make this issue, when I issue this alert, then they use social media. You can track the case, traceability. In the case of
motor vehicles, it's easier to work on this and find the buyer, the consumer, when the alert refers to a product that was manufactured and sold recently. But when we're talking about a vehicle that was sold 5 years ago, maybe it's on its second or third owner, for the companies it's difficult to contact the buyer directly. And in that, there's also needs to be strategic alliances between the state and the suppliers, finding ways, ingenious ways, and alternatives to detect who is the current owner, depending on the license plate and the registry of motor vehicles, etc. And other types of products is more difficult. But we always need to be constantly working in that sense. The more efficient alert campaigns, what we're looking for is reviewing the texts that are proposed by the companies when an alert comes up. We call it a washing or an attenuation of risk, make it more impactful, more direct, so the consumer that sees this in the press understands that a risk of losing brakes means losing brakes, and not use ambiguous language, and make it clear for the consumer that the recall is a serious matter. We're also talking about, when we're talking about consumption, we're talking about the symmetry between provider and consumer. There's a symmetry also between the state and the consumer protecting agencies. We have information, we understand the topic and the matter, and the consumers and media are not. And that is something that we also need to collaborate in. Uruguay needs to develop a habit, and I know that Chile has that habit, and we work coordinated with the private sector. We are not interested in indexes and files and sanctions that were applied. What we are interested in, policy-wise, is that this is efficient, that the campaigns happen and that they are done well. That way, I don't need to enforce any sort of sanction and open any files. And also has to do with the loyal, competent competition matters. Everybody that has products that have a flaw, they need to recall them, and not just part of the small number of companies. That way, we can also work on the number of campaigns and the officials that we have reviewing content of what is published, and if results every 60 days, the companies need to report, and if the office decides to shorten the time frame, then depending on the results that are provided, we can ask more frequent reports, and we can request text changes if the results are not being satisfactory. The impact of digital technology. I'm going to give an example. We released a regulation in Mercosur, the information that needs to be available in digital media and consumer protection. At the time, we opened a file on Mercado Libre. Mercado Libre called us. They said that the regulation gave them trouble. Before we made that law in Uruguay, we invited everybody, chambers, important companies, and law firms that were assessing and advising the other companies. We made them know the regulations to do the necessary adjustments, and in a few months later, we started with enforcement. And Mercado Libre, since they're an intermediary, they have buyers and suppliers. So that put them in a tight spot. And they said, okay, you forced us to improve. You were the first company that started enforcing these matters and gave us a sanction expedient. We thought we were complying with the regulations, and we were not doing them. They did an AI-powered sweep of all their suppliers, because many of them started years ago creating a user to forum. Please go ahead. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to be part of this forum when we're talking about the management of product recalls. And today we're going to have 3 presenters of this topic. We are going to have Tanya Topka, recall directors of the National Highway and Transportation Administration of the United States. The second presentation will be in charge of Daniela Parra, who is the Chief of Sustainability of Sornac in Chile. And the third presentation, Challenges and Best Practices During Campaigns, from Leandro Contreras, Customer Experience Head of Honda. And also one presentation from Maria Carolina Ramirez, the representative from Colombia. We are going to begin. I think that we have one more person that is online. Okay, perfect. Tanya Topka, please. Will she be online? And we'll give her the floor. She's a director of the Office of Defects and Investigations of the NHTSA of the United States on the Department of Transportation. She has had many leadership positions on the Defects Investigations Office when she joined in 2019. Before that, she was the head of the Quick Recall Program and the Fire Hazard Division, electrical and mechanical, both in the Consumer Advocates Organizations of the United States Compliance Office. She has worked in product safety, risk assessments, product recall due to safety concerns, and the evaluation of new technologies since the year 2000. So we give the floor to Tanya Topka. We are establishing the uplink. I don't know if you can hear us, Tanya. You can hear us? ¿Pueden escucharme? Yes, we can. Okay, gracias. No pueden avanzar a la siguiente.
So I'm from the Department of Transportation's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is responsible for keeping people safe on Americans' roadways. Mission is to save lives, prevent injuries, and reduce the economic cost with traffic fatalities. You can go back to the previous slide, sorry. So in the United States, we do a large number of vehicle recalls each year. As you can see on the blue bars, that is the number of vehicles recalled each year from 2014 to 2023. The yellow bar across the top shows you how many vehicles have been recalled in each of those categories. So for example, in 2023, we have recalled about 960 had 960 recalls and recalled about just under 40 million vehicles in total. You can go ahead to the next slide, thank you. So in the United States, the recall process usually starts with the manufacturer determining that they have a safety defect that requires a recall, or they have a non-compliance with the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard. In some cases, we determine at the government level that a recall needs to be done, but that's very rare. For the responsibilities of the manufacturer to conduct a recall, they must provide a report to my office outlining all the details of the defect, the remedy, and what needs to be done, and what they're going to do. They also need to notify owners in writing of the recall, provide a free remedy program, provide us with the recall completion rates, reporting for 5-year period, and offer a VIN lookup tool. So vehicle owners can look up to see if their vehicle has an open recall or is subject to a recall. You can go ahead to the next slide. So we make sure that we have a great transparency for our recalls. We allow an email subscription service. We offer an app on your telephone. We also make sure that we put every recall on our website and have interactive dashboards and tools for people to search on our website. You can go ahead to the next slide. So we also have the ability for people to go to our website, NHTSA.gov, and look up by their VIN, their vehicle identification number, their license plate, or their make and model. We also provide flags for recalls that are more urgent. So recalls that are do not drive, there's a reason why you shouldn't be driving that vehicle. For example, an airbag recall. Or for when there's a fire risk to not park the vehicle inside. This usually applies to electric vehicles. And we make sure that those are called out in bright red so you can see them. And starting next week, we will have a yellow highlighted box that will be for over-the-air software updates to let people know that a software update will fix their vehicle. You can go to the next slide. One of the tools that we've developed is having these interactive dashboards on our website that allows people to search by manufacturer or model or component or other metrics to look for recalls and recall trends. We also have it available for investigations, so people can see publicly what investigations we have open. You can go ahead to the next slide. So a few tips that we have found to be effective for increasing recall completion rates. And we do put these on our website. I have the website link at the bottom. So the big one we've seen is using direct and plain language about the risk, not minimizing the risk. Not using technical or legal terms in recall language notices. Making sure that greetings are appropriate to the person, using their name instead of just dear owner, using their actual proper name. Obtaining the current owner contact information and really trying through registration or other means to find out who the current owner is. Using a strategy that includes multi-channel or multi-touch approach, different ways and multiple ways, and continuously going over time to make sure that they are getting the information. An emphasis that repairs are free in all recall materials, that there's no charge, no cost to the vehicle owner. Notable use of the manufacturer's brand or logo on all the recall materials, so they identify that it's something they own. Reinforce the consequences of not getting the recall repaired, what will happen to them, and use graphics or images whenever possible to display that risk or severity. Provide instructions in every communication to owners that if they are no longer the owner, how they can get in contact and get their name off the list and identify the new owner. Use social media and dealer or retailer communication strategies. Use an approach that considers current owner demographics or barriers to obtaining a repair and mitigate those barriers. Monitor parts supply and communicate parts availability. So even if parts aren't available, letting people know when they will be or what your estimate is for that. And then make sure repairs are as convenient as possible. Provide time estimates, towing, mobile repair, free loaner vehicles, courtesy shuttles, or software updates as available. And you can go to the next slide. Thank you.
Agradecemos la presentación de Tania. Ahora vamos a pasar a la segunda presentación, que se llama Gestión de Recall en Chile, Avances y Desafíos, que está a cargo de Daniela Parra. Daniela Parra es administradora pública, magíster en Ingeniería Industrial y diplomada en Técnicas de Vigilancia para la Seguridad de los Mercados. Actualmente se desempeña como jefa de la Unidad de Seguridad y Sustentabilidad en el Consumo, USCC, del Servicio Nacional del Consumidor, SERNAC. Con una destacada trayectoria de más de 12 años, lidera la Mesa Nacional de Seguridad de Productos, promoviendo estándares de calidad y seguridad en el mercado. Además, actúa como contraparte técnica de la Organización para la Cooperación y el Desarrollo Económicos de la OCDE. fortaleciendo la cooperación internacional en materia de seguridad de productos y protección de los consumidores.
Muchas gracias, Luz. Muchas gracias a todos los que hoy día están acá presentes. Gracias. Agradecer también a Tania, que se tuvo que conectar de Estados Unidos, que nos está acompañando también. Y vamos a revisar ahora un poco cómo se correlacionan en el fondo hoy día los sistemas que tenemos en lugares tan distintos del hemisferio. La siguiente lámina, por favor. Bueno, primero que todo, familiarizar a algunas personas que tal vez no están asociadas con los conceptos de los recalls. ¿Qué es un recall? Un recall es un llamado a las personas a reparar un riesgo que está presente en alguno de sus productos. Básicamente es eso. Pero ¿qué es lo que lleva el recall detrás? Es todo un proceso de mercado en el que intervienen varias empresas y autoridades para poder gestionar correctamente la prevención de esos riesgos y la mitigación de los mismos. ¿Ya? ¿Qué es lo que se visualiza entonces en una alerta de seguridad? Básicamente se hace una identificación clara del producto que tiene
the product, that defect and risk are identified, eventual accidents associated to it, instruction consumers should follow, repair measurements, and something crucial, something important are the contact points of the company. So people nowadays in Chile particularly get informed of all the present recalls. What we have available are several information spaces, among which the website of the CERNAC as an institution, the website of product safety.cl or Seguridad, Producto Seguridad. It's been relaunched today, and today it's been updated. It's a specialized website in product safety where we can feed it with information, and also the website, which is this one from the Consumer Safety and Health Network, the CIA, the Inter-American Rapid Alert System. In all those web pages, consumers can be aware of all the alerts. Under which umbrella can we manage this? The law of the Protection for Consumers establishes the law to everyone on safety in the consumption of goods and services, as well as the company's duty to protect people from those associated risks. Particularly, there's an article, a section within this law for consumers in section 46 stating that once companies are aware of a product that is in the market and their risk was not announced before, they are obligated to make the authorities aware. One very important definition here is that the competent authority for all the purposes in the market should always be understood as the sectorial organ guiding or auditing that category of product, and always to the national service of the consumer every time products are in people's hands. And it is our work as a national service of the consumer to have it under custody and protect their health and safety. Next, please. In addition to that, to what the law protected, the base law, there has been some other legal sections to reinforce this faculty of the CERNAC, and also the duty by companies and people's rights. Specifically in the law 21,988, more requirement has been established where, among other things, you can read that automotive industry, particularly in automotive industry, should clearly inform the requirements to maintain the voluntary warranties, including maintenance, costs, authorized workshops, and so on. And also it indicates and clarifies that consumers can freely choose the technical service shops, except for some justified exceptions. And whether a repair and the warranty lasts for more than 5 working days, companies should provide a card of similar characteristics so the people do not miss the opportunity to use the product they acquired. This is related among each other a lot, and this is related with the condition by the recalls. Recalls are valid and apply to the product irrespective of who the user is. For example, if the car is a car that has been resold, this is the second or third owner, the alert and the recall always apply to the product. Therefore, the person who has it under their custody has anyways the right to have the caution measures executed at any time. This is very important. And one more thing, it does not require maintenance and not required to be done in the specific brand shop for that specific flow. Other measurements demanded under that spectrum should be respected around the warranty. Next slide. One more important thing we like to outstand here regarding the recalls. Recalls, we do not manage them autonomously or independently or in an isolated manner. We have shared experiences with all the members of other countries where we can see that recalls and products are sold at the various markets, and many of them are overlap. Some of them are generated in United States and they are the same supply here. The only difference we need to make is between the vehicle's FIMs, which is like the identifier of the vehicle, which do not always apply for all models of the same brand, but for a particular series. That type of considerations need to be made, and to do so, we are coordinated in constant coordination with other sectorial organs, also with companies, where we keep continuing communication or constant communication to identify if an alert applied in other country applies in our market, if those items, those laws have been imported here. The work with the sectorial organs is fundamental. As a consumption organ, we do not have the technical competencies in all matters. Therefore, it is fundamental we can support each other, or we can be supported by sectorial organs. If it is an electrical appliance and that presents a defect, we talk to the Superintendency of Electricity and Fuels to review that the defect being indicated is effectively the one being indicated. And if the measurements companies are offering clearly can or cannot mitigate the risk. Otherwise, we could be exposing the population to new risks, and that also needs to be prevented. In addition to that, we have been working around the development of messages and information material. We have been trying to improve the scope of the recalls for people. Although we can launch several campaigns, but people do not conclude their campaign, the risk is maintained, particularly in those riskier products such as transit accidents or traffic accidents mentioned by Tanya in her presentation. Important to mention is not only to leave the recall announced, but also monitor the campaign so we can see its progress, and then later to do an assessment of the results, and to do that the tracing of the campaign is relevant to see if additional measurements are necessary to see if the percentage is lower, and also gather with the companies and other businesses to verify if that progress or lack of progress is due to a lack of responsibility by the company or other reasons, where occasionally has to do with the product age, the cost of the transaction to execute the action, and so on. In that sense, we should rescue that alerts in Chile at the campaign execution, which are totally free for consumers. Some gaps in Chile when it comes to recall management is to focus with a bigger focus in raising awareness of the consumers due to the low awareness they have around that, and have a better dissemination to favor the recall management, something we've been doing for a while. We need to systematize it to move on. And also some things related to e-commerce, as it was presented before by our under director on the safety of the products. Next, please. Some progress we have made is the improvement of communication. Although there are to do things, we have made important progress. We have incorporated new technologies in order to better manage the data, and there's something I would like to highlight here, and I would like to refer to it as a new work we will do, and it's finally that in order to do a dissemination and raising awareness project, we have made an agreement with the Transport Ministerial Secretary, where we will work with all technical review plans to pilot safety alerts in the spaces where these technical reviews are done. We also want to do the same with other authorities, and we can add to this the efforts by the girls to inform through their web pages. They have created some repositories allowing people to access more easily to that. Next slide probably is the last one. And well, important challenges around this, besides increasing consumers' awareness, is above all to optimize communications among people and improve communication of the risk. In addition to it, develop systematization work. The risk is something essential. We need to work around that, not only inside companies, but also with mass media, so they can know how to better inform people without generating bigger uncertainty, that bigger than the real uncertainty. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniela. Very clear presentation. Now we'll continue with presentation number 3 by Honda, Best Practices in Recall. Our speaker will be Leandro Contreras. Leandro is in charge of client experiences in Honda Chile, responsible for the application of the consumer's law in the Honda car dealers. With more than 7 years of experience, he has developed systems of connectivity and led campaigns of safety, strengthening their relation to clients. Besides, he leads the implementation of policies and processes aligned with the regulation, improving the satisfaction of the client and the company's satisfaction. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much. I hope you're fine. Daniela, thanks to Daniela, who always considers us for these type of events and help us to constantly improve our management. Before beginning, I would like to make it clear that we are all called here to improve our products. And we as company, as private companies, we are committed to improve this. Let's continue. Before starting, I like to make an introduction about us, Honda. For those who are not familiar, Honda is the leading engine manufacturer worldwide. They can also brag about of being awarded Formula One and leads the sale of motorbikes globally. It's one of the few brands, probably the only one, with presence in sea, land, and air. It's a company reinvesting their earnings in the development of new technologies to foster safety, and also invest a lot in technology to enable the use within the personal mobility for people with reduced mobility people. Robotics is one of their elements to reach that goal. What's the global plan at Honda? By 2050, Honda will be investing around $34 billion during 2021-2026 with one goal: to reach 2050 with 0 fatalities of traffic in Honda. That's pretty challenging because not all people uses Honda as a brand. This is for cars and motorbikes. So they are developing technology around autonomous vehicles in order to reach that goal. Zero carbon, that's another goal in all processes and products. It is also challenging considering that the automotive industry contributes with around 80% of all emissions globally. Let me tell you about the challenges we have as an industry, how we can see this from inside, what our challenges are, our main challenges. Let's move on. The first challenge, and the one that speakers have talked about, is awareness, raising awareness, how making people understand this and can take measures. For everyone, it's too difficult to coordinate time to take the car to the shop. Usually people postpone this type of activities, and this is why it is important that messages and everything we can use is clear. It is also important to outstand that as a second challenge, it's difficult to find clients. We have 80 campaigns of safety active. We've been trying to find cars as of the year 1986. Then it's very difficult to reach those users. It's been 30, 40 owners. Okay, of course I'm exaggerating, and sales are not always formal. So when they are in the motor vehicles record, we have some of them, and they say, okay, I sold that car 20 years ago. That's difficult, but not impossible. This is why we're here. One more thing is the National Registry of Motor Vehicles. When we launched a new campaign, as Daniela has explained, they send us a list of vehicles, a VIN. Not everybody knows what a VIP is, the car's identification 17-digit number with several characters referring to the equipment, the year, where it was manufactured. So when we have this list coming from the factory, they do not always match the National Registry. And why is that? Because probably there was a problem in the digitalization of the car's identification when it was registered some years ago, and only the last 6 figures of the vehicle identification was registered. There's also a lot of problems in relation to the registry. And one more challenge is this challenge to develop the relation with public entities which have the information, and we believe they can help us improve our management and continue moving on. And finally, we got internal processes, challenging ones, generating system, developing platforms, making car dealers aware, make them be part of it, and continue with the availability of gears, which is also a very important challenge. We do not always have everything we want, because in every place there are some budgets we need to respect, so we need to be pretty organized and need to reach our goals in the best way possible.
Moving on to best practices. For us, it's very important to the customer as clearly as possible these kinds of situations. For us, is a very good practice to try to educate the client, the customer, with a clear messaging regarding safety campaigns. We also have a lot of internal training. We want each of our dealerships that work at a brand dealership can be an ambassador of the safety that we want to transmit through our products. Finally, what it is that we want is that every dealership, every person that works, and every customer that we reach out to understands that first, car manufacturers have a responsibility, including myself as a representative of the brand. We have a responsibility that is above the factory warranty. Our warranty is currently it's up to 3 years, but we're looking for cars that are over 28 years old because we understand that the responsibility for safety goes beyond that. The second thing is that they are free. It doesn't matter how many owners the vehicle has had. doesn't matter if they did or did not do any sort of brand-supported maintenance. It doesn't matter if the client repainted it. What we're interested in is that the product that we put out in the market and that suffered any sort of premature wear and tear, it can be corrected opportunely. This is all aimed at correcting issues, as we said, about premature wear and tear and factory errors, which is not something that we can foresee every time. Something that we believe we're doing well right now. We don't want it to create any sort of flaws 10, 20, or even further years down the line. I also want to explain something about one of our safety campaigns. That doesn't only impact Honda, it also impacts the industry, which is the SRS airbag campaign, which are the ones that began this entire revolution when it comes to safety. I don't know, somebody has explained to you. This campaign is focused in the inflator of the airbag. That is a small cylinder, no larger than a soda can, that contains the chemicals that are mixed and are excited electrically at the moment of impact. This was put behind the airbag. So if somebody has an accident, these chemicals mix, the gases are expelled, they inflate the airbag, expecting contact with the vehicle occupant and lessen the strength of the impact. What happens throughout the year, car manufacturers realized that they bought from this brand Takata these small cylinders in these more humid, more saline climates, and these orifices would be saturated and blocked. So at the time of an accident, instead of releasing the gas through the orifices, this cylinder would explode, sending shrapnel through the airbag and potentially harming the vehicle occupant. And that is very, very concerning. Currently, as a brand in Chile, we have over 40,000 vehicles. Honda started importing vehicles to Chile at the middle of the 60s, and currently in the year 95 has SRS airbags in all their models. That's why it impacted us so strongly. Thank you for letting me get off track for a little bit. What are our main challenges? We have challenges when it comes to databases. We buy databases to reach out to customers, and we complement this with internal information complementing our needs. We also have trouble with the scale of the contacts. We need to contact many customers in a very short time frame to advance with our goals, and flexibility is also an issue. We need to always be flexible and be able to include our customers into our safety campaigns. We need to evaluate our communication channels because the world is constantly changing, and we need to use different channels to reach out to people. And there's also the promotion through official channels. It's an important challenge to understand what are the official channels of the brand, and also visibility. Visibility in our website, visibility of our dealerships, and so on and so forth. How does this work internally? We need to create a plan. Our plan needs to have the option of evaluating our capabilities to do this successfully when it comes to space in the dealerships, the amount of spare parts that we have. 1 minute, please. Of course, I'll speed it up. We need to contact people through our platforms. We need to have a platform that is capable of sustaining contact with customers and provide the service and feedback that is necessary. That's what I was saying right now. And lastly, what is the challenge in all this? The challenge is 100% of our customers, we obtain the data of about 55% of them. 6% of them actually reply to us. 3% of them schedule a citation, and only 2% actually go to these scheduled citations. We do not have the information of 45% of pending clients that haven't been notified because we lack their contact data. We do not know who these vehicles belong to. And here is the invitation. We've seen many presentations, but if I want you to stay with something, is that I want you to understand that us as a manufacturer, we are intent on figuring out who these other 45% people are. You need to go through a technical assessment plan for your car every year, as Daniela has stated clearly, so we can find these cars. We understand that we understand that we at least need to inform our customers. We need to reach out to them between 6 and 14 times for them to actually go. Can you move on to the next slide? Well, these are our results over the years. This year, we challenged ourselves looking for additional growth on the pending campaigns that we have. And thank you so much for your attention. Now we're going to move on to presentation number 4. Towards a safer market, the safety of products in Colombia. This will be presented by Maria Carolina Ramirez, who is a lawyer of the Externada University of Colombia, managing telecommunications, new technologies, and state hirings. She has several years of experience in public sector. She has had many occupations, such as the disciplinary chamber procurator and the elite hall of disciplinary investigations, and she has also been part of the state council. She's a delegate superintendent for the product protection and consumer protection of the superintendents of commerce. Her work has been focused on administrative matters through interdisciplinary investigations and resources related to administrative sanctions. Her professional credentials have profound knowledge of analytical skills through judicial investigation, effective coordination of teams, and excellent communicational skills. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. And firstly, I would like to thank CERNAC for this kind invitation directed by Andres Herrera. Thank you so much. We've felt extremely welcome in this wonderful country. We've had a very, very warm welcome that has us very, very happy and content. So thank you so much. In Colombia, the Superintendency of Industry and Commerce is the entity in charge of following up on consumer affairs, both in motor vehicles and also any sort of product for personal consumption. And these competencies were found established under political constitution. The product safety is enshrined in Article 78, establishing that the people responsible in the commerce chain and production of goods and service attempt against the safety and health of consumers. As a development of Article 78 of the political constitution. Can you hear me? All right. Our statute of the Ley 1480 establishes a constitutional right, and we can find it in different dispositions of the statute related to safety. We find a right to safety that all consumers have, so their products don't mean any sort of risk or danger to their health or their lives. We have the definition of safety, and we have the definition of defective product. As an example of the competencies that we have in the superintendency when we find a product that may attempt against the safety or life of the consumers, we have an order that we impart a few years ago. For example, in the case of masks, here we see that the risk is given by the design of the mask, especially for children under 14 years old where they don't have breathing holes. So we ordered the makers of these kind of masks took into account the design of the mask and embedded certain features that would prevent risk to children's lives. The information effects can also be a risk to people's healthcare. For example, laser pointers. There was also a recall order because they did not contain the necessary information for them to be handled correctly. And in some cases, some people were blinded by these objects. So there was also a recall order. And also, of course, defects that may be present during the manufacturing process. In the case of airbags, the 1480 law has these statutes that forces people to guarantee the safety of their products. And it establishes the duty that every member in the production chain and trade chain, they must have if they have the knowledge that there's a product in the market that could be harmful or have adverse effects against the health or life or physical integrity of the end user, once there is knowledge of that matter, they have the imperious duty of letting the superintendency know in 3 days after receiving the knowledge and putting to the superintendency's disposition the corrective measures to avoid any sort of damage to befalling the customers for both non-delivered products and the ones that are already in circulation. Now here's the procedure when we do these safety campaigns. It doesn't matter if it's the manufacturer or the provider or distributor, the obligation applies to everyone. They need to inform and adopt the corrective measures that are necessary. Currently, the Superintendency of Industry and Commerce is surveilling the over 2,000 safety campaigns. Among them, we highlight the 142 related campaigns exclusively about the airbag inflators of Takata, vehicles that vehicles that are from the years 1999 to 2018. There are currently over 115,000 of these airbag inflators yet to be attended in Colombia. We've invested we've imposed sanctions for over $350,000 in related to the reporting and execution of these safety campaigns. These are some of the many brands that are included in this safety campaign, even though not all of the vehicles of these brands have these airbags. Along other vehicle-related products and other products in general, we have all these other safety campaigns that we can point out. For example, in food and drink, cleaning articles, toys, construction materials. The most representative ones are baby and children accessories and items, and we keep a close eye on all these campaigns. The entity has a safety portal, product safety portal, where providers and producers and manufacturers have the responsibility of reporting unsafe products. This provides information to consumers. And we also have a whistleblowing portal for people to report products on our website. We have the administration of this year, as we also mentioned in other presentations. This is a constant factor in the management that we do when it comes to product safety. We are constantly verifying international portals as well. As you can see here in America, Asia and Oceania, and Europe. The CR is synchronized with the OECD portals and organizations and with the United States with the NHTSA and CPSC. As dissemination strategies, we have informative videos, informational videos of the Takata campaign that we constantly have available on the web. We have an folder of files directed towards entrepreneurs related with product safety and safety campaigns and recalls regarding the regulatory framework of different products and how these campaigns need to be managed. And we also have a live question campaign. We did it in conjunction with the road safety superintendency when it comes to motor vehicles. Recently, we developed a digital strategy through our social media in which we look to raise awareness both to consumers and entrepreneurs of the motor vehicle sector that is focused in providing information and seals and what these symbols mean when you're looking at safety systems that vehicles have. We're always looking to raise awareness and educate consumers so they can learn to identify the safety features that their vehicles have and what is the most important relevant information that they need to check when they are purchasing a vehicle. And finally, I want to reiterate this commitment that we have from Colombia on safety matters. We are constantly managing, working, and the matter of sanctions is also important because, well, it's also a way of dissuading the people that don't comply with the safety measures and they don't do their due diligence when it comes to product safety.
Thanks to the speakers. Congratulations for your commitment regarding safety. Congratulations. One more time, we thank the representatives of the panel recently presenting the question that cannot be answered now will be in the event website so that you can review them. Now you are invited to a coffee break, and in 20 more minutes we'll reconvene. Thank you very much. Sí, minimum.
Aquí la interferencia por ahí al final.
Sí.
Como te escuchan el parlante.
Sí, pero fue poquito rato. Ya, puta, a ver qué hora es.
Me quedan como 2 cosas nomás a hacer.
Se supone que quedan...
El bloque 4.
¿Y nada más?
Sí, pues parece. Son...
Sí, por el horario no creo que dé para más.
No, a las 5 van a tener a la Erika Isla. Sí, que tienen consumo de protección de actividad, desafío interno.
To close today's plenary session, we'll continue with regulation challenges on product safety, protections on existing regulations, national, international, and compared gaps and new matters to address in the future. The moderator will be Diego Martinez, researcher, attorney of the programs on consumption rights at the University of Chile. He's a researcher of the program on right of consumption at the University of Chile. He conducted research on all matters of this area and has focused on inquiring matters on children and adolescents as consumers and their vinculation in other matters, such as the case of toys. Our speakers are ready, and if you have any question, please use the website as well as the QR code behind your credential, please. Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the invitation by Cernac to be the moderator and sharing this instance with the distinguished national and international colleagues. And using these instances to share with you is something very valuable. In second place, the topic of this table, I would like to say that in Chile and other legislations, probably you said this before, safety is a basic right, as it is information, free choice, among other rights being part of the catalog of basic rights of consumers. And that's where the important lies. There are some authors who have considered this type of basic rights is not only about intention declaration, but they are fundamental subjective rights laying the foundations for the consumer's protection. In Chilean legislation in compare right, we will find the enshrinement of the basic rights, and also in our country we can connect it to products and services, and we'll find some special matters, for example, parking or toys, which are targeted to a population that's been vulnerated in our society. We'll have to talk today about product safety, and we have an excellent panel here. I would like to introduce them. First, Professor Eric Island, Doctor in Law, Director of the Space Regulation and Consumption at the Autónoma Universidad of Chile, distinguished academic, Mr. Ricardo Salazar, President of the Defense of the Consumer from El Salvador, and Mr. Guillermo Guzman, Head of the Interpretation and Legal Interpretation Department of the Consumers Association of Chile. We'll start with the presentation of Erika Isler on the challenges around the dangers to the integrity to the guardianship mechanisms. Good evening. Thank you very much to the CERNAC for this invitation. I thank Mr. Andres Herrera, National Director, as well as Daniela Parra, the Head of Safety and Sustainability. I'm very glad, not only an honor, but also I'm very glad to be here. I worked 4 years at the CERNAC, so I feel affection for the CERNAC, and I have been able to see my workmates back then. My presentation will be available for you. If you want to have it, I can share it through email, or maybe you can ask the organization to share it with you. I was asked to make some reflections around the challenges of the Chilean legislation around safety in consumption. And challenges, well, they are huge, and some of them are related to some deficiencies in our law. In matters of safety in consumption, we should distinguish 2 areas. The first one is prevention, something been talked about in the previous panel, and it's about the prevention of damages through some guardianship mechanisms such as recall, surveillance, safety alert. And the second area is repair, which is a responsibility that comes after it, once the damage has been done. And in terms of safety in consumption, what's important about it is, unlike quality, the legislator seeks to establish these 2 mechanisms. In matters of quality, we only have the ex post guardianship, which is the guarantee. But in terms of safety, as the protective legal asset, we have these prevention mechanisms. And in both cases, we have challenges. Today, I will focus on the first ones due to time constraints, since we have only 10 minutes and a clock that's been ticking for some time so far. But I would like to tell our international colleagues, but in repair matters, we do not have a law on that. We know other countries do have that. A little time ago, from Colombia, she made a presentation, and the statute of the consumer has some norms around that. The Brazilian code also contains that, and the Chilean case, our law on responsibility per product is in the sanitary code, and it's pretty nascent. It's new, so the big challenge on that, I won't refer to it due to time, is about this debt around this compensation action called safety to responsibility per product. I will refer to the first ones, which are the guardianship mechanisms. Maybe you can help me pass the slides, please. Which are the prevention and schematized mechanisms under 3 important groups of mechanisms, which is surveillance, alert or warning, then the establishment of safety. A brief configuration to understand the deficiencies in our law. which has been compensated by the actions of the CERNAC and somehow by the best practices of some companies, as we have heard some time ago. The first prevention mechanisms is surveillance. In this case, the company, what it has to do once the product is in the market is to continue inquiring and understanding what happened with their product. We have passive and active surveillance. The passive one is once the product is in the market, they continue doing some research. It may cause some damage or not. There are some unpredictable damages, of course, but once the product is launched, we continue inquiring on what happens around safety. And then we have the passive one. The prior one was active. Passive one is about receiving reports. They may be from the mass media. We know that in the Chilean case, during the pandemic, there has been a lot of safety alerts from social control. The food producing dogs dead, that's through a social control. That's also a passive surveillance case. The manufacturer receives the information from the citizenship, from a study center, or from a university, and so on. At present in Chile, surveillance is being regulated based on the pharmaceutical products, which is called pharmacy surveillance. In other products, this is not surveilled on a guardianship. The second one is warning, and this is why, by this we mean safety alerts. Once people are familiar about the defect of a product, then comes the mission to alert. There are some flaws here. And finally, not only alerting is enough, but also we need to reestablish safety. And how can we do that? How can we do that? It depends. One's possibility is instruction. For example, by informing the consumer that the product should not be used in one way, but in another one. Netflix documentaries showed one of those things. Maybe you have seen something about the IKEA furniture falling down on children's bodies. One of them was instruction: use a hook behind the piece of furniture. And then we have another one, which is the recall. In this, we withdraw the product for what? For repairs. It might be also for refunding in case, or reimbursement, or a compensation if there have been some damage to consumers. And in addition to that, some other guardianship mechanisms which has been assigned in the law, correction measurements, and then some ongoing actions. What are the challenges this protection law tell us in these 3 points? And in my opinion, although the law is not enough, we can see that in practice it's been being more or less compensated by the CERNAC actions and also the company best practices. But CERNAC have reacted by demanding what, in my opinion, would be pertinent. A first challenge has to do with the following. It's about you can tell me about the time, please. Our first challenge is about the origin of the guardianship mechanisms. Daniela talked about the regulation of the guardianship mechanism, and if we understand it literally, we may understand that the recall of the safety alert would only proceed first if toxicity has been declared by a courthouse or when it has been ordered by a competent authority. Neither the law says competent authority, which has been compensated, as Daniela has said before, by estimating that the competent authority would be the sectorial organ and the CERNAC additionally, but the regulation doesn't state so. The problem here, in first place, lies in we do not know first if we should obey the law itself in those cases where toxicity has not been declared, whether we should have the mission or whether they should have the mission to do the recall and to issue the alert. In my opinion, the Articles 49 and the coming one does not contain that, but we can start in the letter D in the norm referring to safety of the product. Even in the absence of a general regulation, in my opinion, safety to consumption safety should be stated for something that is not typified in the law. Leandro Contreras said to us, it's imperative to do the recalls and the alert despite we know that according to the literal order, a possible interpretation, the one I don't agree with, it wouldn't be an obligation. A second point, a second challenge, has to do with the temporary efficacy of these guardianship mechanisms. In what sense? The law does not regulate until which extent we should make the recalls, alerts. Then a first interpretation, the one I don't agree with, should be to claim that preventive guardianship mechanisms are subject to the repair responsibility, Article 26, 2 years of infraction, and then common deadlines. This is a silence or a loophole in the law, according to what Leandro Contreras has said before. In We Are Aligning, he said, the preventive duty, we understand it as an active one until the product is in the market. That's not clearly in the law, but it's been solved in the common law when we have these preventive laws in the ownership actions. It should be extracted from there to the common law. What happens in the case of the Consumers Protection Law? A possible interpretation I disagree with, that's a challenge in matters of protection, is to understand that it is subject to the deadlines of repair responsibility. One deadline expire in indemnization, then the supplier shouldn't have the duty to formulate the safety alerts and the recalls. In my opinion, that interpretation is incorrect. This loophole might be compensated through an interpretation of the law adjusted to this right to safety, through which, while the product is on the market, the duty still exists, and that evidences another characteristic of the preventive duties, and its autonomy. Preventive duties are autonomous compared to repair responsibility. That is, it is possible that repair responsibility is extinguished, but the preventive right still exists. The motives, it depends. Let's imagine the legislation allows the extension of responsibility through development risk, something that in protection to the Chilean consumer in general terms is not regulated. But let us imagine that it is like that. If the manufacturer could be released from responsibility due to development risks, that means they will not respond for the past or current damages the product may have caused, and once he is aware, they are aware of it, they should emit that alert. Whether they do not do that, in that case there is a non-compliance of their duty, not the original product safety, but the non-compliance of the alert, prevention, and reestablishment of safety duties. Same happens with the distinctive prescription. If the responsibility, civil responsibility, should be expanded, the since they are autonomous mechanisms, then under this context, this responsibility emerges again through the non-compliance of the alert.
2 minutes, thank you. That's when it comes to temporary efficacy. And another unsolved point through the legislation is the matter of application. Can we move to the next slide? Towards a picture that's just up there with the news. It has to do with the determination of the application of the recall related to information. We know already that when it comes to reestablishing safety for consumers is informing the consumer, and the other one is recalling for repairing or compensating the consumer. This is a topic that is generally not solved because by Chilean legislation, except for a court-ordered recall. There we go, that one right there. The only case where it's been solved this limit between informing and reestablishing safety via recalls is the one where toxicity has been declared by a court. It's evidently between two options, between informing and changing product. The cheapest alternative for the manufacturer is just informing. And this is not about, we of course need to keep the public order when it comes to economic matters. We can't always order recall and change as long as safety can be reinstated through information. This is something that is not solved in general terms, in my opinion, in legal matters. But the solution that was established by Professor Lautaro Contreras, and with this I'm wrapping up, he says, look, let's use the criterion of the constitutional principle of proportionality to determine the boundaries between one and the other. And in this context, to me, it seems it's very enlightening, the sentence that was pronounced when we talked about these malfunction in pacemakers by the European Union. This case, it was very brief. It also affected some Chileans. A company that made pacemakers and defibrillators, once the pacemakers were released into the market, and after many of them were implanted in consumers, they realized that they might not work. So this sentencing is very important for three reasons. The first one is because the court determined that it's not necessary for the product to fail for it to be faulty. Because if we need to wait until a pacemaker malfunctions, then the people will die. So it's enough with the threat of malfunction to establish a boundary. And the limit between recall and information, it's very coherent with the theory of Lautaro Contreras, where he says, look, we need to distinguish between a pacemaker and a defibrillator. Because the pacemaker, I can't solve it through informing people. I need to change it. Meanwhile, the defibrillator can't be maintained and implanted on people if we change some certain usage parameters. In that case, we don't need to reimburse people with money for the defibrillator. There's a criterion there that has to do with effectiveness, and it's adjusted, of course, to certain vulnerable people. For example, products that are directed towards children. In that case, independent of cost, independent of the way of it being resolved, we need to privilege a recall or a change. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor, for your very interesting presentation. Up next, we're going to give the floor to Ricardo Salazar, who will present Strengthening the Consumer Protection and Product Safety in El Salvador. This will be presented by Ricardo Arturo Salazar Villalta. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. We just came back from the break. It's 5:25, so I'll try to have you guys not falling asleep on me. It's a pleasure to be here sharing with this important instance where we look towards motivating countries and for everybody to pay attention to the regulatory matters. I am the president of the Consumer Defense Department of El Salvador, and I love being here in this city. I am very fond of it because it's the first city that I visited 24 years ago when we were discussing consumer protection issues. A few years back, there was an international consumer protection agency here, and I had the privilege of assisting. It was 1 week that I was here. My first mission was to be here and present myself. So that led to a history that has given me a lot of satisfaction. That already ate up a whole minute. What does the defensorship do? What do we do when we're protecting consumers? I would like to let you people know the following. I don't know. What is it with this? They told me that I just point and shoot. There we go. The first thing is that the consumer defenders, we are the ones that lead consumer protection services, and there's a couple of key numbers here. We basically work as attorneys for consumers. We have a DA or a lawyer. I studied economy for over 20 years, and we tackle all sorts of topics. But the truth is that we are performing important work. We have a sanctioning court, both in person, and the court are designed by are designated by the President of the Republic. I've had the honor of being in charge of the defensorship for over 7 years. I have been working with the government of my country, and it's been an honor to join both of President Bukele's cabinets. And here's a demonstrative amount of numbers to show you what we do. Of course, every country has different habits and different numbers. We attend consumers, we train them, we perform inspections, we recover important amounts of money. These are yearly digits. We also sanction, and the sanctioning court also develops solutions. There's also a great variety when it comes to alerts. We have alerts for toys, for home implements, for electronics, for tools, for handbooks, for kitchen appliances, all kinds of things, just like many other countries do. Now, how does this story come up, which is related through the regulatory framework? Like many other countries, we had a weakness. Before that, out of these 76 alerts, only 15% of them we found the product in our country. And we've emitted over 526 information requirements to companies, of which 90% have replied and over 10% have not replied. This story comes up in the year 2005 when the defensorship is created. And while we have an article that is linked to safekeeping the life of the population and not selling products that could put the population at risk, the truth is that we had a weakness, that a regulatory framework did not cover all of the necessary elements in order to have a regulation that could enforce and make it compulsory for manufacturers, that would have competency and not just the obligations. And these are the procedural times that are key, and it's time that allows the measurement, the objective measurement of the participation of the providers, and of course by the institution. By 2015, the resolution was passed in our constitutional hall that allowed us to emit sanctions, because it wasn't specified yet a clear and detailed sanction when it comes to product safety. And by 2018, we managed to reform the law by incorporating a special disposition for this topic. However, there was the weakness that the entirety of the regulatory body of work was not fully developed, all up until June of this year. The second administration of President Bukele has approved a very important reform where over 50 articles of different competencies, to give you guys an idea, the consumer protection law has over 160 articles. 50 of them, we've managed to reform them. We basically renovated the judicial framework of this. And something important, this comment's going to take me 15 seconds, is the following. In that new regulatory framework with all these reforms, we asked for more. We asked for the necessity of doing more for our people. And it was part of the representatives of this institution brought these kinds of projects to the executive powers, to President Bukele, and tell him, look, we need to do more for our population, but I need resources. So 50% of the fines that came from this reform strengthened the capabilities of our institution. So not only do we want to do more, we need the resources to do more. And that's something that has allowed us today to have this framework in different matters. But I highlight product safety, where we have these 9 articles that we've developed, the mechanisms to act on this. With the knowledge of an international alert, for example, in the case of the defensorship, and the communication on behalf of the providers. We establish a mandatory time frame. They need to report in 48 hours after finding out about the risks of a product. We have the mechanisms to identify the supplier, to describe the risk in matters of product safety, write the effects that it has, its geographical location, where the product could be causing these effects, and we also articulate the indications and the measures adopted to correct these flaws in risk and risks. And also in the cases where something has happened, we can describe the associated accidents to these dangerous products, and we incorporate an articulate of two important plans, one of dissemination and one of customer service. It's important to mention that in the case that there is a recall or product change in these kinds of situations, they need to notify the customer that indicates the place and date and conditions of this happening. Then we also have the amplification process when we terminate alerts, and also for non-compliance, part of our legal framework, and how they must be done and what moment it culminates, and the obligations of the supplier and provider. And also we monitor the compliance through two dispositions. One is the number 5 on Article 44 that talks about not complying with any of the obligations that are established on Articles between 10A and 10E of this consumer protection law. We do not leave any sort of loophole for suppliers or providers, and we also establish that they need to put and store products. There's a lot of protections there, and these sanctions can go from up to $80,000 fines. So we have this new framework, that allows us to develop our activities with full knowledge of rights and the law, that we've informed the suppliers, and up to this date we've been in this phase of promoting and informing people so we can let them know about this disposition. And as always, of course, there are some challenges that we have in front of us. We have 50 seconds still, so we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges. We need to guarantee that the consumers don't have availability of products that could be a risk for them. And we also need to do an internal coordination with the state. We have a work table here that's very interesting, that I feel it's a very clear measure of how the government should act, like what Chile is doing. This is something that we could emulate that could be very important. 15 seconds, next slide. That's it. There's the Defensorship's website, and of course our account on Twitter, formerly known. And thank you so much. Thank you, Ricardo Salazar from El Salvador. Up next, the floor is for Guillermo Guzman, head of the Department of Judicial Interpretations and Analysis from CERNAC, who is going to present the safety challenges in foreign platforms. Hello, good afternoon. First of all, I want to say hi to all the present authorities and the officials of institutions that join us today. Closer to the mic, please. Seems the microphones are not my thing. Well, the goal of my presentation is to talk to you about the regulatory challenges and, above all, an important topic towards the future that could happen in Chile and throughout the region. This is the problem surrounding electronic commerce in international platforms. The most known are AliExpress, Temu, and we will be talking about that as the presentation goes on. It's clear that e-commerce has increased considerably in the last few years. Right after the pandemic, there was an astronomical increase in transactions done in e-commerce internationally. And the platforms of international commerce opened up to the possibility of selling products directly to the consumers and to conceptualize what we understand as international commerce are these transactions that are done by the consumer and have the features of being a cross-border trade. So the service provided happens outside of the international borders. In that sense, we can define certain problems or characteristics that are common in the region, especially because consumers have a relationship with a provider that is somewhat distant territory-wise. There are different regulations for those who perform commerce in Chile. So while having regulations and by being outside of the country, we have two statutes or two different regulations. Ones are the ones that apply to the provider and the other one that applies to the consumer. And usually, and in some cases, we'll have regulations that are unequal, so we may be unable to enforce certain protections. There's also the problem of enforcement on regions that don't really represent great comparative volumes of purchasing power. For example, if we compare Chile with the United States or the European Union, the difference in numbers would be too great. So we have the need to regulate the countries that have less purchasing power comparatively. And there's also a limited state control. We cannot think that customs services will receive an exacerbated amount of resources, especially when dealing with the search of products that don't satisfy the needs of an entire country. All these characteristics say that being able to regulate this kind of commerce is very difficult.
By being clear what the Bob said, I will briefly explain the operation of these platforms so that we can understand the regulatory challenges. Generally speaking, these platforms are under a marketplace model. That means that these platforms gather a buyer, it's a platform, and then we have a consumer, a sort of model, a three-party model. The provider of goods and services has an outstanding participation. Platforms usually regulate beyond the transfer of the product, and we should understand that in some cases there's certain responsibility. Besides, regarding the item, this is an important item because products can arrive at destination between 3 or 5 days. There has been even decreased. Some of the products are in 2 hours time in your house, but international commerce we find a lag between 2 weeks and 2 months. Why do we tolerate that, and why do consumers want that? Because it's due to the price, the low price and the versatility these platforms respond to. And at present, in Chile at least, in a couple of months, there's no taxes, there's no custom duties limiting these purchases. Regarding the dispatch, generally these products are delivered through couriers or the postal code of pays. There is a responsibility transferred, and we have seen this in some Chilean cases, where they have the specific responsibility with these suppliers, and then the model ends up resting in some countries regarding the state post offices. And in case there is a conflict, the solution will be only integrated by the platform, and then we can detect different problems I will refer to later. And the conflict resolution is limited to what the seller and the platform can say. By being clear of the main characteristics, we will see the problems. In first place, we have inaccessible rights. It's difficult to exercise legal guarantee or regret in some latitudes. There are some barriers in case there are products returned, for example, from Shanghai, and it will be very difficult to return that product and finally have a refund of the money. This is why people cannot exercise their rights when lacking the protective agencies to stand up for them. There are no certified products. In Chile, we have labels regarding appliances or any type of electrical appliances. And what happens here, some products are received that in some cases might be could not cause any damage, but others will do that. There are some irrefutable solutions, probably there will not be appeal, there will not be an exercise of law in terms of not compliance by the suppliers. And there is also there is an important attempt to limit this type of the consumption, but there are some gaps when they continue to enter in the country these faked products or knockoffs. Regarding this problem and how we at the service are trying to tackle what's happening in Chile, I could say that there has been some complaints, related complaints. In the case of AliExpress, we have received 1,895 complaints related to it, and since they are not validated suppliers, we need to do a sort of search of where to find the real complaints. And in this case, we bump into some complaints where the consumer cannot complain before AliExpress by naming it or not, but mentioning the case, and in terms of search, that causes different responsibilities. In case of other platforms such as Shopee, we have 181 complaints. In the case of Temu, 379. In the case of Shein, 981. It is important, and of course, it's an unnecessary work to find responsibilities, that's for CERNAC, and make these platforms respond to it. In regulatory topics, although until this year, 2024, there was no specific regulation regarding this matter, we need to understand that the Chilean regulation, rather than theoretical problems where it can apply or cannot apply and provided exists or not, the importance is in the practical terms. We don't have addresses, we don't have any goods to seize, and then we cannot conduct any other activities. The only legal modification and important we have had in the last year is what's related to the law of tax compliance. That law will be applied as of 2025, will make vendors paying taxes on added value, and in somehow their actions could be controlled. Irrespective of that, we need to understand that this law will not necessarily favor the consumers' rights. There will be addresses, some vendors will pay taxes through the mechanisms of method of payments. But the problem will still be extensive, and we as a consumer service, we need to pay attention to that and tackle those regulatory challenges. I'm running out of time, so I will advance my presentation. Although we may see that there is a lack of regulation, we may also make a comparison with what's happening in the European Union. At present, and I would say as of 2022, there is a law of digital services trying to find responsibility in these digital platforms, and some points making suppliers to be registered before the European Union. The idea behind this proposal is that we may force that Latin American legislations do the same, so that we can make these vendors to be registered in the countries, so that we can finally find protections for uses which are more and more frequent. If we could compare with other type of complaint, we do not have too many of them, because platforms do comply what they promise. But of course, the risk is high in terms of consumption safety. just Christmas lights without the necessary labels might result in a fire. Then regulatory challenges will be that in Latin America we can understand that we should regulate these platforms so they can be part of the formality of trade. Reaching final points in my presentation, I would also like to give you this information. It's a case that's been prosecuted by an European court in AliExpress. The European Union has demanded the Chinese company to be registered and follow the parameters of the law. Within this, have pressed charges against AliExpress because they do not possess a risk mitigation process in the obligation of consumers not to prove the information provided by the suppliers, not to have proper advertising, not to make the process transparent, and make reports on illicit products. As you can see, the things we have identified on the complaints and what's happening in Latin America's reality matches a lot what has been informed by the European Union. We will follow, we will be paying attention to what's happened with this research because still there's no determination determined by the European Union investigation. And to conclude, and I apologize for talking more on my time, and as a reflection and as a regulatory framework, we kind of sort of establish three regulations. First place, to legislate on a strict application of the law for protection for consumers or make suppliers to have a Chilean address. We can, although there have been some changes regarding the responsibility of the middle people, we still need more as a nation and as a region to offer a proper behavior, proper to modern times, to make or to raise awareness in the population when it comes to the cheaper products that entail risks. Buying cosmetics or appliances through this type of platform may damage not only people but also the environment. And finally, I have to say that we need to increase audit, particularly with the new routines or tendencies by the vendors, so we need to strengthen customs officers, CERNAC, in the search of audit and the integration of technologies such as X-rays at the customs offices or others. Regulation, actually, if we can have a stance as a region, we might meet the needs to protect consumers. This is it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Guillermo, for your presentation. Thanks to the three speakers of this panel and the interesting reflections they have suggested during this panel, Professor Isler, around the preventive challenges we have, particularly in our legislation, with the deficiencies she has mentioned, and the importance of the role of the information in that space. Ricardo also referred to present times in El Salvador around the alerts and the regulatory framework being implemented, and Guillermo describing what happens in the cross-border trade with these platforms, which are more and more important to consumers. It's a reality, and probably it will be more important in the coming years, even probably more than the traditional trade. So thank you very much to the three of you, and a big round of applause. One more time, thanks to the representatives of this panel for your valuable information, and also all of you who have presented. We'd also like to thank the participation of everyone in this first plenary session due to the different communication channels. We also remind you that questions and pending answers that could not be answered today will be compiled and published in the coming days in our website. We also remind you those who have used translation devices can be returned at the table. And finally, we conclude this first day of plenary session of the 11th International Workshop of OES Consumer Safety and Health Network, and tomorrow you'll be expected at 8:30 or through our website, seguridaddelproducto.cl. Have a very nice evening, and thank you very much.